Okay, so I wanted to do a tutorial on how to create an anaglyph. Anaglyph is this 3D look that you would see like in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, where by using a red filter and a cyan filter on each eye, you would create these like three-dimensional stereoscopic images. It's got a very retro look and one that has been occurring in print recently, so it's kind of come full circle. It's got this like retro 80s vibe to it. Here's an image from a magazine of Lady Gaga, and this is what we're talking about here, where you can see that the image is offset slightly to reveal a cyan layer and a red layer. Now, I've wanted to do this myself for some time, but I've never really had a good inspiration to use it. And then a student brought this up and was like, hey, how do you do this? I'm like, oh, that's interesting. So I was tinkering around with it, and this is actually what we're going to make. This is the look here. And I came up with a way to do it that is not correct. And if you want to take a look at my layers here, what I did is I just clipped these color layers on top here. This is about the best I could come up with here, where I have this cyan layer clipped to a layer, and then I'm using a lot of blend modes to kind of produce this effect. It sort of works, and if we zoom in here, you'll see that, yeah, I'm kind of getting some of that cyan around the outside and some of that red, but the image just looks a little bit odd, like kind of sour a little bit, so wasn't really happy with that. So I did find a tutorial online that explained a very simple way to do this, and that's what I'm going to share with you now. Okay, so to achieve this look here, it's actually quite easy. It's ridiculously easy. Check this out. Here's the final, like I said before, and this one happens to be black and white, so I'll add that effect on at the very end. So let me turn these layers off, and here is our raw layer. It's a model, and we're just going to duplicate it twice. Now this layer is set to multiply for some reason, I don't know why, so let's turn that back to normal because you don't want it to be on multiply. And we're just going to hit Control J to make a perfect duplicate. Now we're going to be using a blending option here. Most people are probably most familiar with blending options insofar as like drop shadows and strokes, but they can do much more than that, and I would point you to the blend if. These are very cool, and maybe I'll do a tutorial on these in the future, but very powerful feature here, the blend if. But what we're going to be doing is this advanced blending underneath channels. Now I've got a whole host of tutorials on channels out there for channel chopping and channel masking, blah blah blah. What we're going to do is we're just going to click through a couple of these buttons. We're going to turn off the red and we're going to turn off the green and choose OK. Now let's turn off the underlying layer, and this is what we're left with. So you can see that we've got kind of like a blue filter, which is cool, and it's almost there, and we could actually use this to produce something kind of different. But let's double click on this little icon on the right hand side again, bring this back up, and let's turn the green on, because if we really want that truly 80s retro look, it is a red and a cyan. Those are the two colors that are most used, but I'll show you a couple other options that you can do here in a second. Alright, that one looks pretty good. Let's turn that off. Let's turn this underlying layer on. We're going to kind of do the exact same thing, where we're going to go to our effects, blending options, but instead of turning it to cyan, let's just turn off the blue and let's turn off the green, and there's red. Choose OK. Now if we put both of these images on top of one another, it looks like the photograph, and it's because it's compositing the red and the cyans together, just like basically an additive system would. It's just like adding up the values here. But if we were to use the move tool here and just use the arrow key to shift these ever so slightly over, take a look at what happens. And you can see now we're getting that offset cyan and that offset red. Pretty cool, right? Let's move her back into position so it's a perfect composite. So that's pretty interesting. But what if we want to create more of this type of look, where it's kind of black and white in colors? Well, it's pretty simple. All we're going to do is just desaturate these layers. So we'll hit Control-Shift-U, or if you're on the Mac, Command-Shift-U, and Command-Shift-U, Command-Shift-U. Now it's black and white until, again, we just use those arrow keys to offset that some. And there's that really kind of cool offset red and cyan. Pretty simple. So you can go full color or you can go black and white. I think the black and white looks kind of interesting. You might even want to hit it with a levels adjustment to bring out some of those dark areas. That's up to you. So you can have a lot of fun with it. So let me show you one last feature to kind of customize this a little bit in case you don't like the red or the blue. So maybe you don't like that red and blue. Well, you've got other options you can mess around with. Let me back this up a few steps here before the desaturate. And we can trash these effects here. So let's turn those back on so it's just the normal full color image. We'll duplicate it once again. And this time maybe instead of cyan and red, we can do some other complementary colors. We'll double click here, bring that back up, and let's try blue and yellow. See what that looks like. So you can see that because the two are opposite, when they're layered on top of one another, it produces a full color image. This should be familiar from my additive demo on Vimeo. You can probably find that in the links, but let's go ahead and offset this a little bit and take a look at that. A little bit different look. And again, we could just desaturate this. And maybe that's more of the look that you're going for. Where you see those purples and yellows. It's kind of cool. Maybe you don't like that. Instead of, so here would be cyan. And what else could we come up with? Purple and yellow. What would be the opposite of purple? Is these two on? I guess it would be green. Let's turn that one on. Yeah, check that out. So they do have to be opposite for this thing to work, but yeah, the purple and green actually look kind of nice. I like that. So that is how you can achieve an anaglyph effect in Photoshop. Same would apply for After Effects too. So if you want to animate these, just carry over the exact same idea here. Pretty simple, pretty forgiving, and what's best about this technique is the fact that it's what I would call live, meaning that if you don't like it, you just simply double click here and turn back on its origin, and then it's basically back to the way that it was. Now I did desaturate it, so that's something I have to bring back, but it's very forgiving. You can go back at any time and switch it out if you don't like it. All right, good luck with it. Let me know if you have any questions.